How's it going, guys, and welcome back. So we recently just platinumed Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, and in this video I'm going to be sharing with you guys some of my top tips or simply things that I think may help out players who are having a little bit of a rough time with the game. I know as far as YouTube is concerned, it's a little bit late for tips and tricks videos, as pretty much everybody's already got these out on the second day of the game, but I've genuinely been enjoying Sekiro, and I wanted to really make sure that this video wasn't myself just struggling to think of things that sound kind of cool or sound useful that really aren't, just to make up the video. I wanted to make sure those things that generally could help some of you guys out. So with that said, let's just jump into it. The first tips we're going to go over are the things that I've noticed in the comments most of you guys have been either complaining or having a hard time with. The first of all is definitely the mini bosses. Many people have been having a really tough time with some, if not most, of the mini bosses in this game. And with good reason, they are some pretty tough enemies. But it's something a lot of you may have already started to notice, is that you can backstab or get a stealth death blow on most of the mini bosses in the game, even the ones that kind of look like it's impossible because they're looking straight at you. There's usually a way to sneak around behind them, get above them, or a different manner of death blow to eliminate one of the HP bars completely before the fight even starts. As you're seeing in the gameplay in the background right now, it really is most of the mini bosses are intended to be able to get a stealth kill. Just off the top of my head, there's only a couple I can think of that you can't actually get one free stealth hit on. For example, Orin of the Water, I believe you can't do this on, and the Shichimen Warriors, I know you can't do it on either. But I recommend you look around and try to find some creative ways of maybe getting a stealth attack on most of the mini bosses. Okay, so I think that's enough examples, and we've wasted enough time on that. Let's move on. Another thing that is absolutely brutal in Sekiro is every time you completely die, you will lose half of your gold coins as well as half of your XP. So why am I mentioning this? Well, I've seen so many streams and playthroughs and stuff of people never spending their gold. They don't really know what they're saving up for, but they always seem to not want to waste it, which is natural on most video games. You get this mentality of not wanting to spend it on basic items just because it feels like a waste early game, and you want to kind of save up. But let's face it, if it's your first, even second playthrough on Sekiro, you're going to be dying a lot, and you're going to lose a lot of gold if you don't spend it. This is especially true before boss fights. If you know there's a boss fight coming up where it looks like there's a mini boss ahead, go back, spend your gold, and then return again when you've got nothing to lose. If you added up the total amount of gold you lost on your first playthrough in total, it would be insane. You could buy so much stuff. Which kind of transitions automatically into the next tip I want to share with you guys. Use the items. Guys, the items in this game, the consumables, are extremely overpowered. Whether they're the sugars, the one that increases attack power is insane against some of the bosses. The stealth one that makes it so you're harder to detect by enemies is incredibly good in certain areas as well if you're just trying to sneak past. I've seen some players, especially speedrunners, find some very creative ways to use the stealth items to get past certain areas. And surprisingly enough, one of the things I didn't use for pretty much my entire first playthrough was the Fistful of Ash. It's such like a common item you find pretty much everywhere. While in theory it's good, you've got to be such close range, it just feels like it's not much good. But against certain enemies and bosses, the Fistful of Ash is one of the most overpowered and broken things in the game. I don't know how much you really want to do this, but you can literally throw it at the monk's face and attack twice, throw another one, attack twice, and keep on a constant loop until you run out of Fistful of Ash. So I'm not saying to try to cheese the bosses in this manner, but I am specifying that definitely you can look for creative ways of using the items, as they can be very useful in this game. And if there really is nothing in the shops you want to buy, you're simply a person who doesn't like using consumables in these sort of games because you feel like if you buy one and use it and then die, you've completely wasted that to never see it again, which is completely understandable. I also fall a little bit into that category. So in that case, make sure you're buying the coin purses you can buy from some of the merchants. So for example, the light coin purse is going to cost you 110 gold coins, and they only bring 100 gold coins inside, which, you know, seems a bit of a rip-off. Why would you want to spend 110 on something that's only going to give you 100? Well, for the simple reason, like I said before, you're going to be dying a lot in this game, and you're going to lose a lot more than simply 10% of your coins. If you die, you're going to lose 50% each time. So it's definitely better to store it away if you're not going to spend it right now, because late game, there is definitely a lot of things you're going to want a lot of gold coins for. So if you're not buying stuff, make sure you're at least investing in the coin purses before each boss fight. Also, very similar to the tip I said about using items, figuring out which items are good for what areas, the same goes for the prosthetic tools. There's certain enemies, mini bosses, and even main bosses that can be completely destroyed by using the correct tools at the right time. Now again, I cannot specify this enough. I am not encouraging you to break the game and try to abuse the game mechanics like we can see here, for example, against the Corrupted Monk. If you are interested, you can literally just spam Snap Seeds and then also followed up by the Firecracker tool, and the monk can't move at all. You can do the entire fight really without even having to learn the moveset whatsoever, and this is a pretty late game boss. Like I said, I'm not encouraging this exactly because stuff like this is definitely going to get patched in future updates, but there are certain uses for them that maybe aren't as overpowered. For example, even against the Ogre, the first real mini boss of the game, fire fire is very effective because it stun locks him for a little bit. Not enough for you to completely destroy him like we just did here against the monk, but it is enough time for you to get a few extra hits in and help you out a little bit in the fight. So maybe sit down and think which tools could be helpful maybe if you're stuck in certain areas of the game. Next up, let's look at the skill trees and which ones you should be trying to get first, which ones are absolutely necessary for this game. So the first one, and definitely the most important one of the entire game, if you could choose just one skill to have, it would hands down be the Mikiri counter. This thing is by far at the moment my favorite skill in the game. It allows you to very easily counter the thrust attack. And if you've made it even to the Hirata estate mini boss here, you'll know that thrust attacks, sometimes the ones that can't be blocked, can be an absolute pain to perfectly parry. But with the Mikiri counter, you've got the entire frames where you're dashing forwards. If you get hit in any of those frames pretty much and you're dashing forwards by a thrust attack, it will instantly step on the enemy's spear or whatever weapon they're thrusting with, dealing massive posture damage. So this thing is really a must. I cannot specify this enough if you haven't picked this up yet. And then a little bit later on in that very same skill branch, there's going to be another one called Shinobi Eyes, which simply increases the posture damage you do when executing a Mikiri counter, which I would leave for a little bit later, but definitely aspire to get it as soon as you can, as later game this is very, very useful as well. Also inside the Shinobi Art skill tree, right at the top, there's going to be a skill called Breath of Life. Again, this is another one I cannot specify enough how much of a must it really is. What it does is every time you execute a death blow, whether it be on a boss or a random enemy, you recover a percentage of your health, of your HP. And really, just by the description, it may not seem that impressive, but once you got used to using this and then you go to a new playthrough where you don't have this skill, for example, you're really going to notice it and you're really, really going to miss it. Trust me on this one. And the only other two I would heavily encourage you to get are the Ascending Carp and the Descending Carp. These pretty much just help with posture damage when you get perfect deflections. Now, there are definitely other cool and really useful skills out there, but those are the ones I would really try to focus on first of all. This game really does focus on posture damage a lot, which is a really cool mechanic. However, it's easy to fall in kind of the mind trap that the posture damage is the only enemy stat you have to worry about and not its HP at all. I see so many people just trying to attack and deflect everything to get perfect posture damage and then just get the death blow that way, but there are a lot of enemies and bosses that their recovery on the posture is so quick, it's quite honestly not worth the risk of trying to get perfect deflections off at the start of the fight. And this mechanic is explained in-game, that the lower the HP of the enemy, the slower their posture recovers. So it definitely pays off to try and actually get body hits off and actually damage the enemy's HP before worrying about deflecting them or trying to knock their posture down. For a lot of the cases, there obviously are exceptions. Certain things, like for example the drafts, you don't have to attack them a single time. These enemies are made for killing just by deflecting their attacks and getting posture damage, for example. But there are a lot of bosses where just because you can deflect their attacks doesn't mean the best idea is to deflect their attacks. Just because an attack is unblockable, it doesn't mean we need to parry it. We can actually iframe through some of them by simply dodging as we would in some of the previous games, usually ending up behind the enemy where we can get some free hits in. This isn't exactly something you'll be worried about at the beginning of the game. At the start, just try not to get hit too much, but once you get a little bit better and start to notice what attacks are coming, try to learn which ones you can dodge through and definitely pay attention to this. And quite honestly, I would say that is it. I mean, there's other tips, sure, there's things I didn't notice at the start of the game. For example, you can hide behind a wall and throw shards while in cover to lure enemies out. But like I said at the start of the video, I didn't really want to just fill this up with numbers of lists of things that sound kind of interesting that you may not have noticed, because quite honestly, I've never thrown a ceramic shard in my life on this game. Sure, they may be useful for specific situations, but it's not something that's really going to help you out in the long run. So anyway guys, I hope you're all enjoying Sekiro. If there are any veteran players, also feel free to leave all of your best tips down below to help out any newcomer players that we may have looked over in this video. I'm sure that will be very much appreciated. And with that said, if you did find this video helpful, don't forget that thumbs up button, subscribe for more content coming very soon, and we'll see you next time.